I feel like I have this backpack that I'm carrying of rocks. And every time something feels hard or I don't know what to do with, or it activates me, it's like I just put the rock in the backpack. And I said, the backpack's getting too heavy. I just want to put it down. And she gave me this really great analogy. She said, you don't need to put the backpack, you don't get to put the backpack down. What you do is you take it off and we open it and we look inside of it. And you will realize that what's in there, they're not all actually rocks. You've just been thinking that they're rocks. And it was kind of this analogy that got me thinking, okay, so what else is in there if they're not all rocks? And it's like, obviously, some of them are beliefs, some of them are like programming. And it was just this realization that I couldn't outthink all the rocks in the bag. That was never going to be possible. That I could process them, I just couldn't outthink them.
Welcome to Limitless, the podcast for cycle breakers, change makers, and conscious leaders who are done performing, proving, and pleasing, and are ready to live, lead, and create from deep alignment. I'm your host, Fiona Walsh. Every 2 weeks, I hold space for real soul-expanding conversations with guests who are still in it. They're navigating their biggest fears, shedding old identities, letting go of patterns that no longer serve them, and rising into their limitless potential. Together, we share what it's really like to be human, messy, raw, imperfect, and learning to own every part of ourselves, even the ones we've tried to keep neatly tucked away. We go deep into the work of coming home to yourself, getting out of your head, feeling safe in your body, letting go of old stories, and creating a life that's true to who you really are. Subscribing to Limitless is the best way to make sure you never miss an episode. So hit pause and tap follow or subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. Because this isn't about doing more. It's actually about remembering who you are. And that's what makes you limitless. Welcome to Limitless. Today, I'm joined by Tahnée Sanders. She's a messaging strategist, a founder, a deep thinker who has a rare gift for helping people get to the heart of what they really want to say. Tahnée started her career in journalism, quickly rising to become the youngest editor of a daily newspaper in Australia. On paper, it looked like a dream, but behind the scenes, something wasn't sitting right. That chapter became the beginning of a much deeper journey, one that's taken her through multiple pivots, profound inner work, and completely redefined her relationship with success. Since then, she's followed her intuition through many evolutions, from journalism to florist to strategist and to co-founder of her latest venture, Unwind. Through it all, one thing has remained constant: her deep curiosity and her gift for asking powerful questions. She also has a deeply inquisitive nature, and her incisive questions help people uncover the essence of who they are and how that truth informs their brand, their story, and their content strategy. She doesn't just help people find the right words, she helps them find the words that are most true to them. And for me, this conversation today is going to be personal because we go way back. We met in Vancouver when we were both free agents before either of us had kids. My eldest's first social outing as a baby was to her balcony in Kitsilano. And soon after that, we both became neighbours in Deep Cove, which is a magical little pocket of North Vancouver. And when I had newborn twins and a 2-year-old who climbed the walls, she was a friend who showed up every Friday, sometimes with a bottle of rosé, just to be with me. And her daughter used to come along too. And she also was one of the first people that I watched on as she started her own business. And I must say, I watched in awe, in curiosity. I probably asked a lot of really annoying questions. And I really admired how she brought the strategy studio to life. And if I was completely honest with you guys, in those days, there was a little voice in my head that said, I could never do that. But then the day that I finally got over that little story, she was also one of the first people I called to ask for advice and let her know what I was doing. And since then, she's actually helped me shape my messaging strategy for myself and my business. She pinpointed my breakthrough story, the one that I wanted to keep private, but ended up launching this podcast with 12 months ago. And she trained me and is my go-to expert for using ChatGPT. So we're going to talk about it all today. The identity shifts, the inner work, the moments that quietly changed everything. And what I want to say is that everyone needs a Tahnée in their life. So I am so, so glad and honored to have you here today on Limitless. Welcome.
Oh my goodness. Thank you. And that just made me emotional listening to you retell that. Thank you.
That's right. I got through it without crying. I'll have to say I did practice it a few times because there were tears earlier today. All right. Nay, can you take us back to that moment in time where you were like, oh my God, I can't keep going on like this. Something's got to change.
Yeah, it was so clear to me. I don't know in the moment if I realized how pivotal it was going to be, but I can still remember it like it was yesterday. I was 26 years old. And like you said, I was the youngest female editor of a daily newspaper in the country. And on paper, I was living what I thought was my absolute career goal that I would want to achieve by the time I was 40. And in reality, it was so, so different. I had a small team. I had a readership area the size of France. And I was in a male-dominant mining town, and I felt like every day was a battle. But on this one particular day, I just had to cover two stories that were very emotional. One involved a suicide that the family had asked us to tell their child's story. And I had to go and cover a very traumatic court case. And I didn't think that I could send one of my team to do those stories. I thought that was just unfair. So as the boss, I took myself, and they were not only traumatic stories to report on, they were traumatic for, I guess, the people involved in it as well. And when I had to report on this particular suicide, the family hadn't told the extended family that they had asked me to attend, and they got very aggressive towards me. I obviously removed myself immediately from the situation, but then had to go to the courthouse and report on this not very pleasant court case, and it just all got too much. And I had a panic attack, and I'd never had a panic attack before. I didn't even know what that was. And I managed to get myself out of the courthouse back into my car before I had this full-blown panic attack. And I rang my husband and was beside myself, and he thought someone had died. I couldn't get a word out. And I somehow managed to get myself to his work, and then realized that he said to me, "You're having a panic attack," and he talked me through it. But that was the moment when I went, this job was everything I thought I wanted, and this is absolutely not worth it. And that was the moment that I think was the beginning of the end in some ways of my career in journalism. Again, I didn't realize it at that time, but I did. I took a good 6 weeks off from that moment. I had annual leave planned, but I went off sooner. And that was when I started seeing a psychologist. And that was definitely, for me, the first step that made me go, life is not meant to be this hard when you think it's something that you love.
Yeah. And up until then, had like working hard and hard work been a really strong driver or motivator for you in your success?
Absolutely. And I grew up in a household where both my parents ran businesses, and my dad's a bricklayer, and now he's 70 odd, and he still voluntarily, well, he gets paid obviously, but he still chooses to go and lay bricks every day, which is just mind boggling to me. But he absolutely loves it. But I was very much raised in a household where hard work was a badge of honor, and it was a measure of success. And in that role, I obviously had ascended the career ladder very quickly, but I also was working 60, 70-hour weeks. I hadn't had a weekend off in probably 6 months. I was in the type of town where everyone knew your business. I couldn't do the groceries without someone coming and wanting to have a conversation with me about something work-related. But I had, up until that point, seen all those things as a necessary part of the job, and my commitment to them was proof that I was doing it right. Little did I know.
Yeah. Little did you know. And can you share, obviously on that day, a lot of external things happened that led to the panic attack, but can you take us back to maybe what was going on in your internal world, and maybe not just on that day, because I know that was a straw that broke the camel's back, but there must have been some telltale signs in the lead up, other than the fact you're working 7 days a week, which anyone would hit a limit.
I, again, don't know that I knew this at the time when I was 26, but when I look back as 41-year-old Tahnée, back at 26-year-old Tahnée, I can see that I was so ill-equipped for the situation I was in. And what I mean by that is that I had such a fortunate life. I hadn't dealt with a lot of loss. I hadn't had to face adversity. I well, within, comparative to the people that I was, liaising with, I hadn't. And I think that being in a town where I was very much often the only female in the room, all of these little things kept chipping away at maybe my confidence in some ways. Like I kept showing up and I kept wearing the mask, but I think I began to realize that mask that I thought and that front that I was putting on, all of these little things that kept happening, like going into a traumatic situation or reporting on someone that had really confronting, experiences happen to them. And this awareness that I had lived such a privileged life started to, I think, just chip away at me. And that armor that I thought I was wearing was just slowly disintegrating around me to the point that I, even in my relationship with my husband, we were not long married, and I started to become aware of how much he was having to carry me. I did zero carrying of him. He would go home and cook dinner and then bring dinner to the newsroom to help me proof pages before the newspaper went to print. Like just everything in my world had just become consumed by this job, and everything that had chipped away at me to the point where I was like a shell of a human. And yes, there was more going on in life outside of work, but really work had become what I believe was 90% of my identity. And what was really pivotal for me was I went to see a psychologist after I'd had this panic attack, and this triggering, like I know that word is overused, but the moment that really got me hardest, more than the panic attack, was the psychologist did a very common CBT exercise and had said to me, okay, it's your memorial service and everyone that you love is in the room and they're talking about you. What would they say about you? And again, 41-year-old today would answer this question so differently. But in that moment, the only thing I truly believed people could say about me was that I worked hard. And I just burst into tears and I went, that's not it. Like working hard can't be all that I am. But in that moment, I felt like that's all that I was.
And can you, now that I know you've done years of work and you understand limiting beliefs and all those sort of things, can you trace that back to a belief around if I work hard, I'm lovable, I'm valuable, I'm enough? Yeah.
100%. And I also think that I saw the panic attack as a sign of failure.
Or weakness even.
Yeah. Weakness, failure, all of it. And the thing that I was really grappling with was when I got upset with the psychologist, when I thought all that anyone could say about me was that I was a hard worker, I was also really having to navigate the fact that I believed that my mum and dad would be like, excellent, she was a hard worker. Like they valued that and I was raised to value that. So why did that feel so incongruent with what I wanted with my life when I was raised to believe that hard work was something honorable?
Yeah.
So, and I obviously know that my parents would say would value a hell of a lot more about me than my work ethic. But again, in that moment, that was really something I struggled with, that I did have this belief that hard work was something to admire and was a badge of honor. And here I was feeling like, A, I couldn't do hard work. I'd failed at the hard work. But B, I wasn't valuing it like I thought I should.
Interesting. And when you were talking before about how your work became your identity and how your other half was supporting you and stuff like that, the word that was pinging for me was boundaries. So tell me, what has been your journey in understanding boundaries? Because I went from pretty much zero. And I think you can do that in your 20s if you're a high performer, because there is enough time and you usually have enough energy. But then everyone comes a time where something breaks that and you're like, oh, I got to go back and learn these. So tell me a little bit about your relationship with boundaries then and maybe now.
Yeah, I had none. Honest. I had zero boundaries and I would never say no. And I also realized that I had a belief system that saying no meant I wasn't working hard enough. Saying no meant I wasn't the good girl. Saying no meant that, all of those beliefs.
All the good ones, yeah.
All the good ones. And again, you're right in saying that when you're in your 20s, you don't have a lot of other responsibilities that make you realize how valuable boundaries are. And I left journalism and also left Australia within kind of 12 months of that event happening. And then again, I didn't have children for many more, there was probably a decade in between that panic attack and when my daughter was born. And I don't necessarily think I paid as much attention to boundaries until becoming a mother, but I definitely started to have boundaries in terms of with my relationship, because I realized how, not that my husband would ever have said this, but how much of a depletion I was becoming on our relationship, that I forever needed him to pick up the pieces. And I never gave him room to even have pieces needing to be picked up. And that was when I went into a completely new career in Canada, thinking that we were only going to be there for 12 months. It was so freeing to realize I was in the type of job that, not being a manager initially, I truly did clock in and clock out. And I think it was the first time I experienced what it was like to almost have boundaries placed on me versus me having the boundaries, in that you weren't allowed to work overtime, or you had to get overtime pre-approved. And all of those concepts were so foreign to me. But I'd get home from work, and even Jono would comment, he'd be like, "Oh, how was your day?" Like he could feel that my energy was different. I was like, wow, okay, so I guess these are those things that people call boundaries. It was almost like they had to be shown to me before I learned how to start creating them for myself.
Yeah. My God, you're like reminding me of when I first started working in Vancouver as well, and in the first permanent job I had here. And people were saying, you don't need to work this hard. You can go home earlier. I'd worked in a big commercial law firm in Australia, so long days was just what I did. And I was horrified.
Yeah.
I was like, my high performer was so like offended that you're telling me I don't. And I'm like, no, my hours are my worth. Like all the stories, like now I understand them. I can sort of have a laugh at myself about them, but it was very confronting.
Hugely. Like, what do you mean I'm allowed to say no? What do you mean that people go home when they've finished the end of their shift? Like, I can still see work to be done. What do you mean I just leave that? Like, it was such a reprogramming period. And I'm really glad in retrospect that I went through that in less of a high pressure role comparative to what I had been in, because I went into a role where I had zero skills. That's when I decided to try out being a florist, which is hilarious. It had nothing to do with journalism, but in my mind, I would have told the world I was having a career break. And at the time, I thought that's what it was. But the beauty of that experience was that I had no skills. I was at the bottom of the food chain, so to speak. I had to learn everything, but there was such a joy in that, in the ways that I didn't know what I didn't know. And I also didn't know what else was possible in terms of expectations. I could see, for example, a mess around me that needed to be cleaned up, but I didn't understand how a floral business worked at that point. I didn't understand the expectations of all the other people around me. So I didn't have as much of that drive to pick up the pieces because I didn't know what the pieces were. And that was actually a gift, because I started to, experience boundaries that were placed on me as a junior, I guess. Whereas coming from a management position to the bottom of the food chain was like mind-blowing in so many ways.
Yeah, quite refreshing, I guess, at times as well. How you and I always joke about, because we've both got like controlling tendencies that we've done a lot of work on. How did it feel to be at the bottom of the food chain as a controller? Because quite often when you're, type A personality, you want to like get it all organized, and like you were at the top, to go to the bottom is like, night and day. Yeah.
And I think my nervous system needed it, but I wouldn't have had the language to tell you that at the time. I now can tell you that. But there was just this sense of freedom and weightlessness that I had never experienced professionally. Even when I was the bottom of the food chain in journalism as a cadet, I had won the University Medal for Journalism. I got the only cadetship. Like, even though I was the bottom of the food chain, I was the top of the bottom of the food chain, if that makes sense. So I had always been in this somewhat of a leadership type, elevated type position. And in floristry, I was absolutely not, because originally I wasn't even paid. I was just volunteering, essentially. I was interning for free in exchange for giving them my marketing and, copywriting experience. And it obviously turned into a paid position. But I weirdly reveled in being at the bottom of the food chain. Now, the only reason I know I was able to do that is because mentally I thought that this was a sabbatical. I thought that this was this was experimentation, Tahnée in action. I would not have coped if you'd put me at the bottom of the food chain in a newsroom. And I can see that I would have struggled with that immensely. But because I went into an environment where I did not have the skills, it was almost like I had permission. Because I was a control freak, I needed permission to not perform.
Well, totally. And like the story you were telling yourself was like a safety net of like, this isn't a performance-based thing for me because this isn't what I do. This is just a little bit of fun because I'm going to play with some flowers while I'm in Canada for 12 months.
100%.
Yeah. And so what happened? Tell me more about safety nets, because I know that you and I both have this. And when I left corporate, had this big unraveled an illusion one day that the safety net of corporate is an absolute crock of shit and that it doesn't exist. Because like 12 months after I went out on my own, my other half got made redundant and my business was not even coming close to making the amount of money that I was in corporate. And now we were down to like half an income. And I was like, wow, great.
This is fun.
I was like, this could have happened at any point of any time. Well, like I had told myself a story, I created the illusion. And then guess what? We were fine. Yeah. We landed on our feet and we're now doing better than we ever have. Like it's crazy how that works. But tell me about safety nets for you and what have you learned about them and how do you dismantle them?
Yeah. Again, the benefit of many years of therapy, I never realized how I innately built safety nets in every aspect of my life. So even when I was on this career break for 1 year, which turned into 8, but this 1 year career break, I was still maintaining relationships with journalism colleagues in Australia. So I had my safety net. When I left Vancouver, I could go back to my journalism career. Safety net number 1. I then became the wedding and events manager at this floral studio. But safety net number 2 became that I started getting contracted to help other businesses. So I had already established almost another revenue source for myself, even though I didn't have a business. It was just this little thing I did on the side. So I'd established that safety net. I then went on to online course production for a US-based company, and I was creating all of the courses that they sold to creative entrepreneurs that had guaranteed hours every week. Even though I was only contracting, I knew how many courses, like I was involved in that business from day dot, and I knew what their revenue targets were. Like by that point, had become very embedded in the business. I understood how it worked. I knew what forecasting was. I knew how long I could potentially be in that role for. I knew that, okay, I could foresee if the course sales had started to slow down. I knew at what point I'd need to start looking for plan B. I always had this plan B. I always had this safety net. But from the outside looking in, I would have had girlfriends in Australia being like, oh my goodness, you're so brave. Like you've just left journalism behind and you've become a successful florist and you're doing this and you're doing that. But what they couldn't see was the sheer exhaustion in some ways of, even if it was subconscious, always making sure that plan B was there. Yeah. And even when I started the strategy studio, not long after Lydia was born, that was very much the result of me realizing there was a huge market for the skill set that I had, particularly in terms of combining my journalism and marketing experience with entrepreneurship, and particularly creative entrepreneurs who struggle in huge ways to communicate the value of what they do because they inherently can just do it. They don't need words until they have to start marketing themselves. But when I started the strategy studio, again, I would have said that was just this little thing that I was doing while we were still in Canada at this point, but while I had young children, so I had flexibility. I would have told you that's what it was. And I think I've shared with you before, it wasn't until the strategy studio replaced the income I could have made if I was still in journalism. In my head, I had that as some kind of, I don't know, benchmark or something of you'll be successful when.
Credibility.
Yeah, absolutely. And I still would have had a very active plan B until that happened. And then when that happened, I wasn't actually cognizant of it at the time. It wasn't until I did my tax return and I realized that had happened. And I had this moment of, wow, that meant nothing to me. And yet, if I was to tell you, I would have said, like, I'll be successful when I hit this particular milestone. But I do think that realizing that in the strategy studio, I woke up every day. I absolutely loved what I did and I couldn't imagine doing anything else. I think I essentially had this moment where I went, well, this is my choice and I will make this work. And there is no plan B because the plan B no longer brings me joy. And it wasn't until I was willing to accept that a plan B that doesn't bring me joy is not a plan B at all, that I could let go of that control freak's need to have the plan B. And right now, I absolutely have I have no plan B. Like I'm all in on lots of plan A's.
Yeah. A whole lot of joy as well.
A whole lot of joy. And I wouldn't have it any other way. But Tahnée of 10, 15 years ago would be looking at Tahnée of today, telling me how irresponsible I was. And I'm okay with that.
Yeah, yeah. When you were talking about like your plan Bs and like I was like the contingency plans for me were like complex. Like when I was in corporate and I was working on transformation and change and stuff like that, I got asked a question in an interview, like, where have you ever failed? And I like really struggled, because fear of failure was like paralyzing for me. Big learning opportunity once you become an entrepreneur.
Yes.
And then, but I was like, well, I haven't failed because I always have, like, I literally had 15 different ideas in my pocket and most of them would work and I'd be able to pivot from there. And it was like, what I realized though, with that, and again, this like when you didn't have boundaries, you didn't need to have them, but then you add kids into the mix, was that my unconscious was being run by a hypervigilant part. And I thought it was me that was part of my success until I had emotional burnout and I realized, holy shit, all these contingency plans, it doesn't, because I then tried to do that with my child who was struggling at school. And then I tried to do it with it. Like, do you know what I mean? And the combination of the controller and the hypervigilant part were just like, they are two of the main, and the pleaser, like if all of them come together. But that like combination, now I think about like, no wonder it was exhausting. Yeah. And so tell me, what have you learned? Because you've done lots of years of coaching, therapy. Like I know you've done it. You've probably tried more than most people. And you also know you've done a lot of deep work. Can you talk to me about what you've learned about your hypervigilance and your anxiety? Because I know it's probably your biggest area of growth in your inner world. And maybe if you could walk me through from like where it began in terms of talk-based therapy to where you started to have bigger breakthroughs.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I always had anxiety tendencies my entire life. Again, wouldn't have had the language to know that's what it was. But hilariously, you look at your own children, you're like, oh, right, that's me in small form. And I'm so much more aware of it now. But I don't really think my anxiety played up in really strong ways until I had children. And I had another event that kind of made me realize how much more work I needed to do. And it was when Lydia was born. She was maybe 6-7 days old. And we got a call back to the doctors on a Friday night, which is never good news.
Good.
And when they had done her heel prick test as a baby, she had been flagged as potentially having cystic fibrosis. And then fast forward, 10 days of testing and all the things and all of the unknowns. And my controller and my hypervigilance was like not very happy because I had absolutely zero control. And my hypervigilance was like looking to solve. It was just firing in every fiber of my being and I could not do a thing about it. And it turned out that she was a carrier of the CF gene. She did not have cystic fibrosis. But that event, I have since realized, became a triggering event for me for anything health related. And that became my biggest challenge, I guess, is relating to health anxiety. But what I have realized through lots of therapy was I did EMDR to help reprocess that, because even though I'd done so much talk therapy, it was to the point that I think someone had said to me, I actually had a client who worked in the EMDR therapy space, and she had said to me that you can't out-talk trauma. And I was like, oh, but what happened to you wasn't traumatic. And she said, but what does your body believe? And I think that was kind of this awareness of, oh, wow, like I could have rationally told you that I had processed what that experience was like, but my body had held on to that in ways that didn't matter if it was a tummy ache or anything that I couldn't attach a meaning or an answer to. My hypervigilance would just like fly off the radar and my anxiety would be triggered. And I ended up doing EMDR EMDR therapy. And that was maybe for me when I started to be able to tap into the subconscious. And when I did EMDR therapy, the first time I did it was they asked me to pick what you would call a safe memory. So they didn't want me to go what I wanted to. The high performer in me went into the room with the psychologist saying, right, this is the event. This is what happened with my daughter. This is what it's triggered in me. I want that to go away. Fix it.
Yeah.
And firstly, she made me rewind and said, okay, what we're actually going to do is we're going to pick a safe memory. And I picked the panic attack I had all those years ago because I would have rationally told you that was years ago. Or I've worked through that. All good.
Yeah.
So I did EMDR on this memory from my panic attack. And I became deeply aware of how much of that experience my subconscious had held on to, my body had held on to, and I had never unpacked. And it was just like this light bulb moment that went, wow, if you think that you had worked through that, you've just had it flash before you how little of that you had unpacked. And that made me go, oh, wow. Okay, so I would have said this moment with Lydia was the next pivotal moment in my life. I had ignored the fact that I had done years of IVF in the process to get to her. And I started to realize, oh my goodness, I have had, not that any of those I would have called traumatic experiences, but they were still experiences my body had held on to. And when I started to tap into subconscious and realize how much is in there that I had never worked through, that was kind of this light bulb moment for me of, oh, wow. We've got a lot of work to do here. And that was probably the beginning of my journey that kind of in some ways left a lot of talk therapy behind and started exploring other modalities just to start to unpack decades really of, in a lot of ways, limiting beliefs that I had, but also realizing that my hypervigilance was running the show 90% of the time. And I would have said to you, it only related to health, but that was so not true. It was showing up in my professional life. It was showing up in my personal life. It was showing up in relationships. It was everywhere. That I'm very good at thinking about things. I'm not great at feeling things. And I had to learn to realize the difference between out thinking something and having to feel into it. And that was deeply uncomfortable. And I don't even know if I answered your question. Sorry, I went on an epic tangent there.
No. You answered it enough. But yeah, it was amazing. This one's fascinating because I went through a similar thing where I was like, I can talk about my patterns. I can tell you all about them. I've got all the words. And I know so many people who are like, when they say, oh yeah, I seem to go back to psychologists and I'm talking about the same stuff and I feel like I'm talking in loops. You are. Like 100%. Like you are. Well done.
Yeah.
But it's time to graduate from talk therapy because you're talking about what you're consciously aware of, which we now know is about 5% of our like entire brain. And then there's 95% that like EMDR or somatics like I do in my coaching, IFS, parts work, all these different ones that some of them are relatively new, I would say as well. So they may seem to some people like, oh, what are these new age modalities? But it is helpful, I think, for people I work with, and I know this from people I've had, Cara, who I think you were mentioning before on the podcast late last year as well. When people know their patterns, it is helpful when you do somatics or EMDR because because you can talk about them, but you don't release them. That's the issue. You don't dissolve them. The imprint of the fear that's attached to it, the shame, the guilt, the whatever the emotion was at the time, it's still there. It's somewhere in your body. And when you go in and feel that in a safe environment, and I'll say that's why they didn't want you to go to the hardcore one first because you wouldn't have been able to safely feel it. Your body would have shut it down because where protective mechanisms are strong. But like once you feel it and then it dissolves, then it's like, oh, you actually notice it as well. Like, do you have, when you've done sessions afterwards, do you, because I mean, in my coaching sessions, people are just like, oh, I feel like so much lighter. And I
love that you said that.
Start to flow and like all these things. And I'm like, yeah, because you've had this literal block that's been there for like 15, 20, 30 years.
When I did one particular EMDR session, I would always talk to Jono, my husband, about all these different things I was trying and whether it was just a talk therapy session or whether I'd done EMDR. And I would tell him in detail, like all these things that came up because it was so fascinating to me. But this one particular day, I mustn't have told him that I had an appointment. And I guess because I work for myself, I work from home, I would go to an appointment in the middle of the day and come back and he'd be none the wiser that I'd done it. And he got home from work this day and he looked at me and he said, "What did you do today?" I was like, "What do you mean?" He's like, "You look lighter." And he's like, and I'm not commenting, like he wasn't commenting on my body. He was like, I don't know how to explain it, but you look lighter. And I was like, oh my goodness, I had an EMDR session today. And I told him everything that I'd unpacked. And he's like, whoa, like it was a lot, but he could see it in me. Yeah.
I can see it in people from the beginning and end of coaching sessions. Like if they come in really stressed and they've had a lot on, by the end, their face looks physically changed and sometimes more color in their face. Their eyes will look brighter. Like it's really hard to explain.
Yeah.
I think it's one of those things you just need to experience, because I say to people, it's like sort of magical. And they're like,
it is.
Now I understand what you mean. And I think maybe it is magical because we can't see it or feel it. Like we can feel it, but it's not something we can see or touch. And we can make, for those of you who are thinkers like Nay and I are, you can make sense of it afterwards. So don't worry, your brain gets to go to town on it afterwards and does help with the integration. But when you're actually in a session like that, your body is leading and your body is communicating and your body is processing what your brain unfortunately cannot get to. Because it would have, like if you've been to that many psychology appointments, like it would have got there if it could have. You had the best intentions.
Yeah. And I had done years of talking through these things, exactly like you said, to the point that I had talked through every circle, like I was in that infinity loop of this same conversation. And it was one, kind of 50-minute EMDR session that like 10 years of talk therapy just like dissolved or exploded or something in this one 50-minute session. And I think that's when I realized that I am so intellectual in terms of thinking I need to think through everything. And that was just this huge moment of awareness that I don't need to know the outcome. And that as a control freak or having a strong control, feeling like that makes me safe. Control makes me feel safe. That's, I think, what I had huge fear around when it came into these different types of therapy. Like, what do you mean you want to tap into my subconscious? Like, what if it finds things that I don't like? What if it finds things that are scary to me? And I had all of this kind of intellectualizing of what would happen if I tapped into this subconscious. And then I think the like out of body experience of it was going, well, what do you mean? What if you discover it? Your body already knows it. Like, and it was.
What are you trying to hide?
Yeah.
Like, what are you trying to protect yourself from? It's there,
already
whether or not
in
you want to
there.
go there or not. Yeah.
And I'd said to my therapist, I said, I just feel like, this is before I had done a lot of the work. I said, I feel like I have this backpack that I'm carrying of rocks. And every time something feels hard or I don't know what to do with, or it activates me, it's like I just put the rock in the backpack. And I said, the backpack's getting too heavy. I just want to put it down. And she gave me this really great analogy. She said, you don't need to put the backpack, you don't get to put the backpack down. What you do is you take it off and we open it and we look inside of it. And you will realize that what's in there, they're not all actually rocks. You've just been thinking that they're rocks. And it was kind of this analogy that got me thinking, okay, so what else is in there if they're not all rocks? And it's like, obviously, some of them are beliefs, some of them are like programming. And it was just this realization that I couldn't outthink all the rocks in the bag. That was never going to be possible. That I could process them, I just couldn't outthink them.
Yeah, and when I would love to hear your experience on this, but like when your body started to process some of these rocks, so effectively they're dissolving in the bag, crumbs, or they've gone altogether. Did you notice your energy, your life force energy, your creativity, like your essence of who you are? Did you notice it start maybe just a little bit, but then a flow of like, oh wow, and there's, because I see this regularly where people talk about, oh, they'll come to me and be like, oh, I've lost my purpose, I'm blocked in midlife. Yes, I understand, been there, great, like awesome, I know I can help you. And they're like, oh, I did this course, I'm like trying to find my purpose, it didn't work.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
I've done that too.
Yeah. Oh, you did it. Okay, great. And then I've listened to all the podcasts. I'm like, yeah. There's no framework. There's no stand step. The framework is get rid of the fucking rocks.
Yeah.
And the rocks, as you say, represent fears, beliefs, past memories, lived experiences, which is informing your current and future, like which causes anxiety. Like if you get rid of the rocks, however you choose to do it, these little stars and sparkly things called purpose and joy and freedom and liberation, they all just like fill your backpack.
Yeah. And it's funny, as you were saying that, it's like I could feel it. I could feel it in my body, like remembering, like I guess now I do a lot of that work so much more often. But when I first started it was more punctuated. Like I'd do one session and then I'd feel like, whoa, that was a lot. Like I need time, I need to process it. And then I do the next one. But cumulatively, it was just this feeling of ease started to come into it. And I would have always said that there is absolutely this through line in every career I've had. And it's been around asking questions. And as you kind of said in the introduction, and asking questions to me, whether it's asking a bride what she wants her wedding flowers to be, or whether it's asking a creative entrepreneur to how they do what they do to help articulate their creative process. Like it's always for me been about asking questions. And that element of it has always felt easy to me. And but what I would have said to you is that flow state for me previously would be what I now realize is just deep work. So I've never had an issue with being able to sit down and go into deep work for 8 hours. That just makes sense to my brain. But I previously would have said that's my flow state. Deep work is my flow state. And yes, you can be in flow when you're in deep work, but I had never experienced what a flow state is outside of that professional deep work mode.
Yeah.
And what I realized was like this flow state was this feeling of like lightness where it was okay for things to feel easy. I think I, for so long with that backpack, had held on to this belief that, again, even in my personal life, I'd let go of my professional life needing to be hard, but I still felt like I have 2 young kids at home. Mornings are meant to be stressful. Mornings are meant to be hard. And if they're not, you're not trying hard enough. You're not mumming hard enough, all these things. And I could listen to girlfriends have those conversations about how stressful mornings were. And I, for the longest time, would agree with them. Like, yes, absolutely they are. And, you know, sure, my kids are maybe a bit older now and they are somewhat easier. But it was just this awareness that I don't need to make everything a battle. And I could go into a morning with the kids and not wake up feeling anxious about it, because that's what I would do. I would wake up and I would preempt.
Trying to control.
I'd be trying to control before the children had even opened their eyes. And letting go of that need to control how the day went, just things started to feel easier. I was like, do some people live like this? Like, is this a thing? And now it feels so much more natural to me. And I now know that I am allowed to live like that. That's okay. I don't have guilt around, I have a lot of self-care things that are in my weekly life. And I have zero guilt around those, because those self-care rituals that I have give me this flow state I need to be the best version of myself. They make me a better wife. They make me a better mum. They make me a better friend. And I used to have none of that in my life because I had no boundaries. I never protected time for myself. But I've now experienced what it's like to have those like little glimmers inside you that go, yeah, this is good. Keep following that. Whereas before I would have had one of the glimmers, but my hypervigilance or my need for control would have said, we don't know the outcome of that. Pause. Whereas now I'm not being flippant about life, but I'm okay with following my curiosities and not knowing the outcome. And that for me is huge, because the controller in me would have found that anxiety inducing in the past.
There's so much to unpack in that. All I'll say is 2 learnings that I've had in a similar vein is you can do all the things before your kids get up in the morning, but if they wake up and they're in a stinking mood or they're shit scared about something at school, you have no control, not whatsoever. So like kids just serve it up to you if you think like you have any control over that. And this morning, we had one of those mornings at our house, and I have Amazon Alexa programmed to like tell the kids when it's time to go and brush their teeth, so breakfast is done. And we've added music to these announcements for this term of school. And you could have cut the tension in our kitchen this morning of how tense it was. But when that came on and then Golden started playing and it turned into this instant dance party in the kitchen, I was like, oh my God, because I'd been gripping. I'd been like, oh my God, we're not going to get to school on time. This is a disaster. We've got to do readers. We've got to do all the things. Da, da, da. Then we're dancing. Everyone's dressed, teeth are brushed. There's 3 kids doing readers. And I'm like, oh my God.
Yes, that. And you gave yourself like, not permission, but you gave yourself the opportunity to feel that. I feel like for me, at least, previous Tahnée wouldn't put music on in the kitchen when we've got things to do.
Yeah, there's a to-do list to get through. Like, for music.
Right? Yeah, it's a really nice feeling that I didn't know that was possible, or B, I didn't realize I was denying myself of having.
Yeah, I agree. I want to switch gears around. So last year was your 40th year on Earth, and you like undertook this awesome challenge of doing 40 things in your 40th year. So I'd love for you to share, what was this? What was the intention, and what were some of the big learnings or lessons that you like captured along the way?
Yeah, absolutely. So I had done probably the most amount of kind of different modalities and therapy and things in probably the last 3-ish years of my life. And what I'd become aware of through all of this was, yes, I was starting to experience like what it felt like to live with more abundance, more joy, more flow, all these things. But I was so aware that I didn't have a hobby. And I had always treated my work as my hobby, and I'd moved past that. I knew that work was no longer my hobby, which is really challenging when you own your own business because you're so much more emotionally invested in that compared to having, the kind of 9-to-5 type role, even if you are working really hard. But I'd said to my husband, I need a hobby. And he's like, what do you have hobbies? You love trail running. I'm like, yeah, but I do love it, but that's fitness. Like it's not a hobby. And then I thought, okay, I'm going to make a list of, I'm turning 40 next year. So this was when I was 39. I'm going to make a list of 40 things I want to do on my 40th year. And it was all about kind of challenging myself a little bit, pushing myself outside my comfort zone, making my controller quieten down, doing things that made my hypervigilance be like, are we sure this is what we're going to do?
Are we safe?
Are we safe? Is this a good idea? But it was everything from like, buy a surfboard and learn to stand up, camp at 5 new campgrounds, go on more regular date days, have a massage once a month and a facial every other month. And it was everything from like what some people would consider super indulgent self-care through to like run further than I've run before. So I did my first half marathon. Like it was just this whole big smattering of, there was a few professional things in there, but it was all facets of life, from kids to relationships to our home life to professional life, everything. And it was so fun to do. And I've continued it, and I did not do 41 things let's be honest, 40 was a lot.
Yeah.
It almost became a little bit like, the high achiever had to tick all 40 things off the list. So I was aware of that in the end. But the really fun thing about it was that I would talk to all my girlfriends about it, and I would even share it in my email list with within my business. And other people became really invested in it. Like, oh, what are you up to? You said you were going to do this. How did it go? Or I saw you bought a surfboard. Have you stood up yet? And it just became this really joyful experience that other people started to get invested in as well, which I could then encourage them to say, well, don't get invested in my list, like make your list. But the highlight, I think, of it for me was in my find a hobby, which was kind of the reason the whole list started in the first place. I went on kind of this creative adventure to find a hobby, and I did every creative outlet under the sun. Like you name it, I tried it. I did cross stitch. I did paint by numbers. I did pottery. I made myself buy a bunch of flowers every weekend and make myself an arrangement. Like I kept trying things. And every time a girlfriend would see what I had done as part of my find a hobby exploration, they would be like, this is really cool. Like, how do you find the time to do this? Where do you find these cool projects? And part of it was I could see that they still held on to the fact that they needed to give themselves permission for self-care, whereas I had finally moved past needing to give myself permission to do that. That was a necessity to me, not something I had to earn.
Yes.
But also, it was amazing to me how much more creative I became by being creative.
Yeah.
And
it's a muscle, right?
Yeah. And I had forgotten, like, yes, being in floristry, I was like being creative, but I would have previously not said I was a creative person, which I now know is laughable. Everyone is a creative person, but I would have put myself in the box of, no, I'm analytical. Like I work with words, I work on paper. Like I'm not a creative person, but it was really fun to stretch that muscle to become more creative. And part of the 40 and 40 list was I also deleted social media and really the internet from my phone for 6 weeks over kind of the Christmas holidays. And a part of that was just this desire to be more present. Like I know we all scroll too much and all the things. I was like, how can I not do that? So I deleted everything from my phone. And as part of training for these runs that I'd signed up for, I was running and I was running without listening to things as well. So I wasn't listening to podcasts when I was running or music. I was
just present.
Like, I think they call it like naked running or something, which is kind of,
it's got a name because we all like trying to do 15 things while getting our running 100%.
Yeah. I was like, no, I am not multitasking on my runs. And I would, over this 6 weeks period, I was running and this idea just dropped in. And it was probably, I'd started to be paying attention to, like, I'd heard you talk about it so much, like when things drop in for you. And I kind of was like, what is that? What does that mean? I think that was the next layer of me starting to explore like more intuitive things. But this 100%, this idea just dropped in. And I had previously, just before this social media detox, I had been at a luncheon where Samantha Wills, who is an amazing jewelry designer and creative entrepreneur, and I had asked her a question at this event I was at, and I said, how do you, and there's irony in this because this idea had not dropped into me when I asked this question.
Well, but I mean, it was in your life path. It's just that in time, space, you know.
Yes. And I said to her.
It was orbiting.
It was 100%. And my question to her, I remember it so clearly. I'm never the person to put my hand up in an event and ask a question. Like I might go and one-on-one converse, but I'm rarely the person that puts my hand up and asks for the microphone. And weirdly, I did. And I said to her, how do you know when an idea is meant for you and when it's meant for someone else? And she said, when I get an idea, I write it down instantly. Because if I don't, it snowballs and it gets too big and I feel overwhelmed and then I do nothing with it. And then in a year's time, I see someone else do it. And I think that was my idea a year ago that I didn't pursue. And something about that stuck with me. So when I was doing these
self-sabotage.
Right. So then when this idea dropped in, I was like, I'm going to write that down. And I did. And every run after that, this idea kept growing. And fast forward, this idea turned into my new business, Unwind Co, where I create with my business partner, Kate, creative project boxes to help women embrace creativity, to have more mindful moments and to treat creativity as a form of self-care. But I truly believe if I had not done all of this work to write my 40 and 40 list, to start following my curiosities, to allow myself to experience joy and not have an agenda, I truly believe this business would never have come to be because I never would have given myself the space for this idea to drop in the first place.
Yeah. And I feel like, talking about your backpack, that idea was in the backpack, but it had so many rocks on top of it that it just couldn't get up to the surface so that you could see it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And going back to the backpack, what I've found really fun is whenever I'm speaking to my therapist, we often reference the backpack. And it was interesting to me when I started to unpack the backpack, how sometimes you might think you're dissolving one rock. Yeah. But then just by working on that one little limiting belief you might have had, all of a sudden like 5 other ones dissolve around it. And it's like that kind of snowball effect in some ways. Like I think getting started on this kind of, I don't know, self-exploration or whatever you want to call it, attach any title to it. Sometimes the getting started part is the hardest part because it feels like the backpack is so damn big, like as if it is ever going to get lighter. But it is fascinating to me how, the snowball effect of self-care and nurturing yourself and doing this deeper work is like mind-blowing and cool and fun.
Yeah. And I think also it's like anything that you start new, like you go back to the gym when I started lifting weights, baby weights in March. And I was like, oh my God, I can't even get through a full set of like with these like small ones. This is embarrassing. And it feels hard and all the self-doubt and all that comes in. But then you eventually, like you grow capacity, you grow muscle. It's exactly the same thing when you start to dissolve hard stuff from the past. The first few do feel hard and you actually, I've said, I don't ever not tell the truth about this. It's 2 steps forward, 1 step back. And sometimes the one back feels like you're on your ass and you're like, help me up. Like you don't, and then you're like, everyone has the moment of like, is this actually worth it? But the tools that you learn along the way, and if you are properly dissolving it in your subconscious, like you and I have done, it does start to compound. And then the snowball effect is like, it's addictive in the best possible way.
Oh, definitely. And I know I've sent you so many voice memos over the years and you've done a check-in. How are things this week? And I've been like, well, yesterday I told you it was awesome and this week is terrible and I feel like I haven't even started doing this work, and just the overwhelm of it is real. But you're right, like it is part of the process. But one thing that I love that my therapist often says to me when I say to her, like, oh, I'm really annoyed. Like I thought I was doing really well with my anxiety and I could feel that it was smaller, but this one particular thing really, really triggered me this week. And then I'll unpack it with her. And she'll say, yes, but you're sitting here telling me that you know what triggered you.
Yeah.
And she's like, can we just for a second stop and acknowledge that you wouldn't have known that that happened in the past and you just would have lived with anxiety for a week and not known why? And I was like, oh, that's a good point. I like it. And then she also said, I now like to reframe when I feel, and I prefer to not say trigger now, I say it activates me.
Nice
So
activation too, yep.
Yeah. So I'll say when I'll feel something, I'll be like, oh, that activated me. But she says, well, you've just given yourself a glimmer. Like when you feel activated, it's like this glimmer of, oh, I get to choose what to do with this. And I think it took me a long time to see that looking in on yourself experience. For me, for the longest time, everything was just this one big hot mess. And in a beautiful mess, I'm not like negative about it, but I didn't know how to separate myself from it, to look back on it and work through it and accept that I didn't have to let it have the power over me that I thought that it did.
Yeah. Yeah. And I noticed that because recently I had some activations or triggers and it was like, and someone close to me was like, oh, I can't believe that you're still actually having these responses because you've done so much work. And they didn't mean that in a harsh way. They were just like, because, I've spent a lot of money on coaching.
If you can't fix it, Fee, how can anyone
I do this
fix
for a
it?
living, right? So I'm like, and I was like, but like at the end of the day, I was like, I'm human. And I don't know any human other than maybe the Dalai Lama who like won't always have a reaction to something because we're never fully healed and conscious. Like I don't buy into that bullshit at all. It's more about when this had happened 2 years ago, I would have been in a spiral and not spoken to that person and given them the silent treatment for 2 weeks and convinced myself all these stupid things. Whereas now I'll notice after a few minutes, oh my God, I'm in my head. I'm starting to do that thing. And I zip off the dance floor and back up onto the balcony. And from an observer, I'm like, oh, I got pissed off by that comment and I'm doing the thing, but I've noticed I'm doing it. So I'm good because you caught it so much faster. You labeled it quickly. And then you had a choice like, do I keep spiraling or do I like be a bigger girl and go stand up on the balcony because I've done the work and I've got the tools. But like, yeah, like 100%, you'll still get triggered and activated no matter how, like even, as I said, years and years and years and years of this, and you'll still always have those things happening.
I love what you just said there. It reminded me of something when you talked about having all the tools, because I remember having this conversation with you and I said, I feel like I have all the tools in my toolkit and I still can't fix this. And you'd said words to the effect of me of what are you trying to fix? And it was just this acceptance that, anxiety is a part of who I am. Like it's, I think I had worked with this mentality of, again, the high performer fixes things. I make it go away so it doesn't happen anymore. And when I realized that anxiety wasn't something in me that I needed to fix and make go away, it's just a part of who I am. And I have the opportunity to be the observer self, to see that happen and choose how I respond. And that is something that I don't think I'd realized was an option to me because I didn't understand it. I didn't, and I hadn't done the work to get to that point. But that was, I remember explicitly saying to you, I have all the tools in my toolkit and they're not working. I can't fix it. And you were like, what are you trying to fix? Say, damn you for being so wise.
Another one of our conversations is just coming through, and I know you'll be okay with me sharing this, was around like, and people do this all the time around, it's got to do with fixing, but like you've worked through something and you've resolved something. And so instead of just being like, cool, it's going to like ride this out for a little while. And then, when the next trigger or something comes up, I can then like take that to my therapist, or I can do whatever presents as my next, you were like duck diving of like, where's the next thing to do? I've got to find it. And like, and I did that. I mean, that's why I laughed when you did it. Because I was like, I was there because I was like, I'm on a mission to fix myself. I'm going to be like, I'm going to be fixed.
Yeah.
And then I can put this aside and then I can be like,
I remember the message you said back to me in response to that. You were like, hold up a second. Like you're going back to intellectualizing this and you're going back into like fix it mode, and your hypervigilance is like looking for the next thing to solve. It's okay to just be. And I was like, wait, what do you mean just be? Oh, yeah, that's right. I can just be. I don't always have to be looking for the next, self-help thing on the agenda to work through.
Yeah. I think we can get too into personal development work and forget that life is for living.
Mm-hmm.
And don't worry, because your next personal development thing it's just around the corner.
Oh, yeah.
Like,
it's coming. You don't need to go looking for it.
Just enjoy the green space while you're in it.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, amazing. Before we go into rapid fire, I have got one last question for you.
Please.
So transformation often happens in small intentional steps. It's very rarely these like big quantum leaps, like we like to be told online. In these micro moments is when we sort of access our deeper selves, and it's when we really have these unlocks that go to long-lasting, sustainable change. So based on your journey, what's one step or one action that listeners could take to unlock their limitless potential?
Oh, I love this question. I think for me, it was realizing that I needed to ask for help.
Oof.
Because and when I say ask for help, I mean it like beyond the level of talking it through with a psychologist. Like I needed to admit that I thought I'd spent the money, I'd done everything right in inverted commas, and I still wasn't okay.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, this is not okay, and I need to ask for help. And there was so much fear around asking for that help because, again, back to all of those beliefs that I had built up over decades, I'd seen the psychologist, I'd done the things, I was meant to be okay now. And I just knew that I wasn't. And I had to let go of the fear of failure, not being good enough, needing to see someone for help to work with my brain. Like the minute that I said, I need help, was, I think, probably the most transformative moment that I accepted I needed to do more.
Yeah. So brave. Wow. Whew. All right. Rapid fire.
Okay. You're going to surprise me, aren't you? You're going to give me not the normal rapid fires.
Because Tahnée been like a long time listener. So I was like, you're not getting any of the standard questions today.
Damn it. Okay. I'm ready.
Damn it. Okay. What's something you truly believe for years that you now know is complete bullshit?
Oh, great question. That I have to work hard. It has to be hard to be successful.
What would you say that belief is now? Like, how do you reframe it?
That I'm successful if it's joyful and feels easy.
Love it. Yep. Beautiful. Okay. What's a belief or part of your identity that you've outgrown and you've evolved past, but some people haven't quite caught up with you yet and still expect it from you or may even project it on you?
Ooh. I would say I think it's around kind of that martyrdom piece of motherhood. I very much carried that in the early days of motherhood. And I would buy into a lot of the conversations about complaining about motherhood and needing wine to survive motherhood. And please do not get me wrong. I absolutely will still complain when things are hard, and I will still have the glass of wine and all the things. But I no longer feel the need to buy into the conversation unnecessarily. And if I'm feeling joyful, I will just not contribute to the conversation if I feel that that might be uncomfortable for someone else. But I'm okay with sitting in the joy. I don't need to make it feel hard for the sake of it. But I know I can still go into many rooms or many conversations where to say that out loud would be potentially seen as obnoxious. And that's not my intention, but I will choose to refrain from contributing because I no longer buy into the narrative that it has to be hard. And in that sense, I mean, in the personal life versus the professional life.
Yeah, totally. And I think it's also breaking a cycle that, women used to get together and guys, I'm sure, do exactly the same and talk about their other halves and they're not getting this or they're not doing enough and da da da. And I'm sure our mums did it and our grandmas did it.
Absolutely.
And there is a time and a place for it, I think, when it's constructive because it is good to get that stuff off your chest. But I always if I've been in those situations recently, I've always said to the other person, are you actually also talking about this to your other half? Because it's not enough just to, because I'm a coach, people also come to me with this sort of stuff. It's fine. And I love it. But I'm it's not enough to come and talk to me because you haven't resolved anything other than get it off your chest. You need to talk to the person who it actually involves if you actually want it to move forward.
Yeah. And I think that's a really great point because through all of this work that I've done, I've learned how much more I needed to be a communicator. I would have said I'm an excellent communicator. I communicate for a living. I'm a journalist. But I wasn't great at communicating that internal dialogue I was having. And I do think learning to communicate that with Jono has been so free. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And me too. I've done a lot of work on boundaries and needs and be able to say, I now need this because of this. And it means I'm taking up space and asking stuff of you. And I'm okay with that because that's what I need for me to be at my best self. Woo! Yeah. That took a lot of work.
Huge, because that's not what our mothers did. And that's not a criticism of them by any means.
No.
It was not modeled. It was never modeled to us though.
Well, it was also taking up space and could have been labeled self-ish, but it's actually self-less when you look through it through a different lens.
Yeah.
Rick and Circles. Okay. Well, what is a desire or dream that you only recently let yourself fully own?
Oh, that I'm an entrepreneur.
Oh, only just recently?
Recently within the last few years. Yeah. If you look at my 40 years on earth, I would consider that recently. Yeah.
Yeah.
It took me a long time I would have said I owned a business, but that to me is different. I feel like the word entrepreneur carries a lot more weight, and that could just be a me story. That couldn't be that's not necessarily other people's perceptions of the word.
Yeah.
But to me, entrepreneur carried a lot of weight. And it was probably something that I put on a pedestal, maybe reasonably unnecessarily. But I think I always dreamed of being confident enough to say, oh, I'm an entrepreneur. And I am.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's just sort of funny because you know how I looked up to you and you were clearly just winging it.
Totally. But that's the beauty. We're all winging it.
Well, but I wouldn't, and entrepreneurship is just winging it every single day. If anyone is wondering, no one's got their shit together.
Oh gosh, no.
And if they are, they're not telling you the truth. So, because if you're constantly pushing edges and trying new things and it shouldn't feel comfortable. It's,
no,
that's just,
and
you signed up for that.
It shouldn't feel like you know what you're doing. Because if you feel like you know what you're doing, you're not pushing the edge of your capabilities or your possibilities or the edge of your vision. And the willingness to say, I have no idea is really freeing because there's so much of what I'm doing that I have no idea. And that's really cool.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really cool. Okay. When you hear the word limitless, what are 3 words, feelings, thoughts are evoked for you?
Joy, freedom, flow, opportunity.
Beautiful. And finally, if you're having a bit of a low day, you need to raise your mood and vibration. What song do you like to crank?
Okay, so I don't have one song. I kind of have a theme of songs. So my songs have to be about dancing. So at the moment, I really love Kelly Holiday's song "Dancing 2," and it's it just for me, my whole body just instantly responds to it. So any kind of song that's about dancing, and I'll just go through phases of different ones, but that's my current one, and it gives me all the good feels.
Do you have that's a new one? Do you have like a all timer that is your like go to?
Yeah, it would be. It's a bit weird. It's rock and roll, and it's Johnny B. Good, because I grew up. I grew up with rock and roll music in my house, and it always gives me really beautiful memories of growing up and my mum and dad dancing at home and things. And when we got married, our bridal waltz, so to speak, our first dance was a rock and roll dance that we had been to rock and roll lessons. We didn't learn a routine, but we learned to do rock and roll dance, and we danced to Johnny B. Good. And now our kids love that song, and it's just like you said, when you put on Golden, which I know is Demon Hunters and what all the kids are into at the moment, and it's the soundtrack of our house.
It's music poison.
Oh, it really is. But I hard relate. So we obviously have all of those songs in our house, but I know if I put Johnny B. Good on, it's like the mood shifter for everyone in our house. And I love that it has such this through line to so many different aspects of my life.
Yeah. Oh my God, that's so cool. And I've got to see the video of Jono dancing.
Do you know what? Someone asked me for it the other day, and I have no idea where it is. But friends, if anyone's listening to this and you find it, please send it to me. I know it exists somewhere.
Yeah, I want to see it. All right, Tahnée, from the bottom of my heart, thank you for coming. I know I asked you to come way back, and we were trying to work out when it was going to be the right time. And I do feel like the stars aligned, and this was the perfect timing. So
I agree.
Thank you for sharing so much depth and so much vulnerability, because I know that like a lot of people come on here are used to speaking about their business and like their professional life, but you shared a lot about your inner world and some of your patterns and some of the stuff that it can be really hard to talk about in a public forum. So I just wanted to thank you so much.
Oh, thank you for creating the safe space to let me feel comfortable having this conversation. Because I talk about work all the time, but this was a really different chat and I loved every minute of it. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. Thank you for tuning in to Limitless. If you enjoyed today's episode and love hearing the stories of courageous cycle breakers, I'd be grateful if you could leave a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Your feedback not only helps others discover the show, but it also amplifies our mission to unlock emotional freedom and true potential. Every review makes a difference in helping more people embrace their limitless life.